Hello, everyone, and welcome back for season 2 of the Wellness on Purpose podcast. Here at the Wellness on Purpose podcast, we appreciate that there is no linear path along one's wellness journey and understand how easy it can be to get caught up in the latest health trends found on social media. Our intention is to provide you with impactful, educational, and realistic information to help you progress on your journey to live wellness on purpose now and for future generations. Hey guys, welcome back. It's Marissa here, and today we have the pleasure of speaking to Tasha Osborne, who is the founder of The Edited. The Edited is a beautiful self-love, self-care, self-compassion brand whose mission is to be your daily reminder to love yourself first. Self-love is a love of self, such as an appreciation for one's own worth and virtue, and or showing proper regard for you and the attention to one's own happiness and well-being. If you are ready to amplify your self-love connection, stay here and tune into this episode. All right, welcome, Tasha. Thank you so much for being on the Wellness on Purpose podcast today. We're so excited to interview you and learn all about your wellness journey and your wellness passions and share and connect within our community. So thank you for taking the time to be on the episode today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we'll just jump right into it. And why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and what your wellness passion is?
So I am the founder of The Edited, which for those of you who don't know is basically just like a little online hub, I like to call it, of all things self-love. The whole purpose of The Edited is to encourage you to always love yourself first and to prioritize yourself, however that may look. So initially, when I first launched, it was more clothing based and having just like a little cozy reminder of your worth that you can cuddle in at the end of the day or as you're getting ready for work or school in the morning, or you can wear under a blazer for a presentation. But it's grown and morphed from what it initially was to what it is now. When it first started, it was a little bit more along the lines of just honoring who you are, in this idea that we always show the world what we want to show the world, and our Instagram accounts and our social media accounts are amazing to be able to kind of like put your best foot forward and show what you want to show, but just to remember to love yourself behind the scenes as well, and your not edited self just as much as you love what you're showing online, because those sides of you are also beautiful. But it's definitely grown and morphed into just a full-blown message of self-love and the encouragement of that. But things have definitely changed a little bit since COVID began, and my manufacturer actually ended up shutting down for a little bit of time, and then they reopened up for a little bit, but it was super reduced, so everything was super backlogged for a while. So it forced me to change and pivot and grow a little bit outside of just clothing. So now we have a blog more so, as well as we released necklaces that say love yourself first on them. Just as a little reminder, the idea behind them is that it's a necklace, so you can wear it close to your heart. You can dress it up if you want to wear it to a presentation. You can dress it down if you're going to the cottage for the day. You can put them under your sweater if you don't want to wear it publicly, but it's just there for you to remind yourself of your worth.
That's amazing. That's so awesome.
So that's definitely where my wellness passion kind of hides out there.
So when did your wellness journey start, in the sense of like your own healing path?
Everything sort of began, I would say, when I was really, really young, but without really knowing that it was a wellness journey. The way I like to word it is that I had a very, I hate using the word normal, because what is normal and what is not normal, but I had a very like textbook, I guess, childhood, where I had amazing parents. I have the best sister in the entire world. I went to an amazing school. I grew up in a great neighborhood, but I still dealt with tons of self-esteem issues, tons of insecurities surrounding that, which I think also makes it extra textbook and extra common for a lot of people to feel that way from a young age.
So how young would you say that this, like, was this public school, high school? Kind of when did the self-esteem issues kind of arise for you on your journey?
So they would have started when I was really young. Some people have feelings towards diet culture and stuff, and it can be a really big pain point for some people. So if you feel that way, feel free to skip ahead a little bit. I won't dwell on this too much. Um, but I remember going on my first diet when I was in grade 4, and I sat with my best friend under the tree in my front yard, and we took a piece of paper and we wrote out a list of foods that we could eat and foods that we couldn't. So, like, the foods we couldn't were foods like, I don't know, chicken nuggets, chips, that kind of stuff. And the foods we could eat were like carrots and cucumbers and just we kind of just like made up our own little diet. And I remember that night my mom had made, I don't even remember what it was. It was something from the bad food list, maybe like, let's say chicken nuggets. She made chicken nuggets for dinner. And then my first quote diet failed that night. And then it kind of like began that little cycle of tying my worth to a certain number and tying my happiness. Oh, I'll be happy when I lose a certain amount of weight, or oh, I had dark dark hair growing up. I'll be happy if I dye my hair blonde and I look like the pop stars that because this was before social media, so kind of like entertainment was a lot more reality TV show based, so Laguna Beach and the hills and that kind of stuff. And a lot of the girls on those shows looked a certain way, and I didn't look like that. So I thought that I had to look a certain way to be valued, I guess.
Yep, yep.
So that kind of started that journey. And it was something that I struggled with for a really, really, really long time. I thought you could only exercise to lose weight, and you could only eat healthy because you wanted to lose weight. And I totally immersed myself into that world.
So as it started in grade 4, was your parents aware of this pattern that you were following, or did it take some years before that was kind of something that was discussed?
I don't think they knew. They very well could have, but we definitely didn't really talk about it.
And would you say that, that was something that, year after year you would continuously look at or address or compare to what the reality TV show was? Or was there a time kind of in your childhood where that just dropped and wasn't a priority anymore?
I think for most of my childhood, it was always in the back of my head. Um, so I children all grow at different stages and at different rates and stuff. I was definitely the type of kid who I would put on a bit of weight and then I would grow taller. So I would kind of like grow out and then I'd fill it out and I'd grow up. Um, and when you're a kid, you can't really process that or understand that it's normal, it's natural, it happens. It's just kind of what it is. Um,
I think even as adults, people forget that you're still in a growing stage. Like in your 20s,
Absolutely.
you're still growing. Like we always are like, I need to lose 5 pounds, I need to lose 10 pounds or whatever. Even now, like I'm going to be 28 and I still have those thought patterns, but I still think to myself, I'm actually not done growing. And nobody really is done growing ever because there's so many variables, right?
Absolutely. And it's so hard to wrap your head around, especially when you're in the middle of it. And it's easy to go into that mindset where, oh well, I'll be so much happier when I lose a couple pounds, or when I look a certain way, or oh, when I fit into my old jeans again, or X, Y, and Z. And it can be really, really, really hard to disassociate with that feeling.
Absolutely. And I feel like, even through high school, so actually, Tasha and I went to the same high school.
Yes, we
And
did.
I remember in high school, social media was just starting to be a thing. Like, I think that's when Facebook had come out and it wasn't really, Instagram wasn't, the go to thing. I want to say Instagram didn't happen until like college or university years.
Yeah, I don't think it was around in high school.
So do you think the pressure of social media now is higher or more in your face than we could say, 10, 15 years ago?
Absolutely. I absolutely think that. And I think that's part of the reason why it's so important for me to talk about this kind of stuff because I remember how I used to feel. And that was before Facetune, and that was before Photoshop really, that Photoshop at least was accessible to everybody from the palm of their hands. And I can't really imagine how I would have felt growing up today and trying to navigate what is real online and what isn't, and knowing that you are still beautiful and perfect behind the scenes and as you are today, and that you don't need to compete with what you see online.
Absolutely, for sure. And it's scary how accessible social media is, especially to kids in grade 4 and 5 now. Like, you think back that we had the reality TV shows that was an influence to us that we would watch once a week. And then now it's like Instagram is accessible all day, every day. And so on, other social media platforms as well, too.
Absolutely, especially TikTok with kids.
Yes, yeah, for sure. So this stemmed early on for you, and then you mentioned that this kind of rolled into more gut health issues. Can you talk about that and when the gut health was something that you were dealing with and how it kind of resolved itself, or if it did?
Yeah, absolutely. So going back a couple more years, when I was in my early 20s, maybe 2021 ish, I went through a really not so great breakup and I felt super lost, which happens. It's pretty normal. And I decided, well, I guess I'll go to the gym. Like, I don't really think anything of it. I guess I'll start on this journey. And I started working out, and I remember feeling like, wow, people are right. You can work out and just not tie it to your weight, or just work out because you want to work out or because you feel good. And I really kind of immersed myself into that. And I started eating pretty clean, not with any big goals in mind, just because it made me feel good. And I knew that when I ate certain foods, I felt better in the gym. And then I started at Trent University, and I met my now boyfriend, and we moved in together, and we started eating a lot more pasta and breads and just different foods. And I remember I ended up gaining some weight, and it's kind of just is what it is, and didn't really think too much about it. And then I kind of started to notice I used to feel kind of sick when I would eat certain foods. And I'm like, that's kind of weird, but I was just kind of like brushing it off. And then I also started to notice that when I was working out, my weight wasn't really going down at all. And there were just like some weird things that were happening. And I started to realize something wasn't right. So I decided to cut out dairy. And that made me feel substantially better, but not completely better. And actually, just about the time that I launched The Edited and I graduated Trent University, and things are going really, really well in my life. Sometimes life likes to throw some not so great things at you, and it's all of the good things that are happening. And I ended up getting so much sicker. So I launched The Edited in May, and by the end of the month slash June, I ended up feeling really sick all of the time. And I'm just like, what is going on? Like, I don't really understand this. Um, but in the back of my head and in the bottom of my heart, had this feeling that had something to do with gluten. I just, my aunt is celiac. I have another aunt who is gluten free. And then my dad had just been diagnosed with celiac disease a couple of years before. So I'm like, it's in my family. My dad has had very similar symptoms and stuff to me. Like, I guess I'll just try and cut out gluten and see what happens. And depending on how that goes, I'll talk to my doctor and go from there. And I show up at the doctor's office with my little notes in hand. I'm like, yeah, I think I have a gluten problem. I don't really know what it is, but like, these are my symptoms. And she's like, yeah, you definitely need to get tested. You have a family history of it. But just so you know, you have to go back on gluten in order to test it because it has to be in your system. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
uh,
So I think I'm celiac as well.
yeah,
And this was the exact same experience for me. And like, definitely doctors in the medical profession, there is a time and place. We absolutely need them. But I'm similar to what you're saying is I didn't have the greatest experience either because
one, I was misdiagnosed with every other gut, IBS, whatever you want to call it, condition. And then when they finally started to rule out the celiac disease, they said, we'll send you for the blood test first. And they did the blood test and they said it came back negative. But then when I had seen the specialist, they said, of course it's going to come back negative because you're not eating gluten. So it wouldn't be a reactive protein in your blood work. So I said, well, what was the point of that basically? But then the alternative test, at least for when I was getting diagnosed, was to get a biopsy of my bowel and my stomach as well.
Oh,
Was that a solution for you that they had mentioned?
no, it was not.
No. And I mean, at this point, I had been, which is probably why you decided not to go further with testing, because you knew already, you know your body, you know your symptoms, you know that it runs in the family and your reactions to when you consume gluten. So, and a test really isn't going to prove much more when you already know what it's going to come out, and you don't want to put yourself through absolute torture of consuming gluten when you can't digest it, right?
Yeah. Well, so she told me you have to have it in your system. You need, I guess, a fair amount is what she said. The equivalent of 2 pieces of bread every day for 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
It's like a lot. So I'm like, okay, well, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. So we got a pack of hot dog buns and we took some, because at this point I was dairy free, we took some vegan margarine and some Daiya cheese and a little bit of garlic, and we made garlic bread for a couple days, and I was not okay. I was so sick. I don't even know if I made it a full week of doing, I think it's called the gluten challenge.
Yeah.
I could not do it. So it got to the point, I talked to my family, I ended up talking to my doctor, and I've talked to a couple other doctors about this since, and I just decided not to do the test because at this point, I knew I was so sick. There's no way I was going to eat it, whether it came out positive or negative. And I don't know if it was like this for you when you did it, but they charge for the test now.
Yes, they do.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, there's no sense in spending $100+ I can't remember how much it was,
Yeah.
but it's a substantial cost for something that could come back inconclusive or negative. So
Exactly.
I decided to just not eat it. But going off of gluten, going back on it, and then going off it again completely ruined my gut that summer. I was so sick. It got to the point where we lived downtown Peterborough at the time. Got to the point where I could not walk to Del Curry Park and back without needing a nap after or needing to lay down because I was so sick. Going into this before, I was a huge workaholic. I thought that your worth was completely tied to your productivity and that, oh, I'm an entrepreneur now. I have to work all the time. I have to do all this. And it got to the point where I had to have a nap every single afternoon because I was just so sick all the time. And that's really what forced me into self love a lot more than what it was before because you have to take care of yourself. Self love is literally love for yourself. And that's going to look different for everyone. And for this stage of my life, the best thing I could have done for myself was have my daily nap and I had a bean bag that I put on my stomach every day. That was a heated bean bag, constantly bloated. So I was really forced to evaluate my self-image as well because I would look in the mirror. Bless my boyfriend's heart. He says I didn't, but I swear I looked pregnant when I looked in the mirror. And it really forced me to attack all of those thoughts that have been in my mind for so long. And honestly, at one point, that would have been my biggest fear was to feel that way and to look that way. And my health journey really forced me to kind of like take it a step further. And during that stage, I talked to my doctor before I did this, but I went off birth control just to get all of the hormones, excess stuff out of my body. And I also switched to natural makeup during that phase as well, which you guys were super helpful for that. So thank you.
Yeah. Tell me more about that. So, okay, first let's talk about switching off the birth control. So, how long ago was that?
Oh gosh, that was 2 years ago. It was
Okay.
summer of 2018. Maybe July or August. I'm not too sure.
Okay. Because I feel like maybe 3 years ago, it was a conversation that nobody wanted to talk about. But now I feel like any female who's empowered to make this choice for themselves and make this transition enjoys talking about it and enjoys talking about the transition. I know I was like that as well, but there are so many variables that come with making that transition, because some women will gain weight or lose weight as their hormones are starting to balance out. But
Yeah.
one thing that I personally found was I suffered with severe acne after this. Did you experience acne?
I didn't. So I did not experience any acne. I started to get hormonal acne when I would get my period, but I would not have any like excessive breakouts or anything like that. And my weight really didn't change a whole lot either. But what I really, really struggled with was navigating my cycle again and navigating what so I was on birth control for probably 10 years. It was a really, really long time at that point. I went on it when I was pretty young because of cramps and stuff like that. A lot of people do get prescribed birth control for different symptoms. So I went on it for cramps, and I was on it for so long that trying to navigate my body to have a normal period is still something I'm navigating now. It's a long transition and something people don't talk about a whole lot.
So when you go off birth control, your body definitely goes through a detox phase. And like I said, some people see it through the skin. Some people, see weight gain, weight loss, mood fluctuations and things like that. But your body starts to go through a detox. And I feel like you also just naturally make the transition in your life to try to get rid of other toxins that are in your life as well. So you mentioned that you switched to natural makeup at this kind of around the same time, which I think a lot of people overlook as like a major toxin consumption when we're using conventional cosmetic products.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about the transition that you made from conventional drugstore products over to more natural skincare cosmetic products.
Yeah. So I was definitely attending Google University going into this, and I was searching all this stuff about how to just feel better in general. And I remember a bunch of people were talking about natural makeup, and I'm like, that's not gonna make a difference in my life. Like, what are you talking about? And then the more I dove into it, I was like, you know what, it's worth a shot. So I really didn't know a whole lot about natural makeup. You guys were amazing, talking about it. I remember the first product I went on was the brand Rosia, I think is what it's called.
Yep.
Coverage was fantastic for the foundation. I really, really, really liked it. Um, it made my skin, so my face is really, really warm in general. I get rosy cheeks really easily. So I think it just oxidized with my skin kind of weird. It made me a little bit orange. But I just love that I can go into Joanne's face and be like, I don't know what I'm doing. And someone's always there to help you and just talk you through things. And then I ended up trying Elate Cosmetics. And I really liked it. And I like that it's also more sustainable too, with the packaging and stuff. There's very, very little plastic in their products.
Yes, I also love Elate. And it was very similar to how you were talking about your transition is. I think I first tried Rosia as well, or maybe it was, no, I first tried the Elate foundation as a liquid because I was always a liquid foundation girl, and I loved it. And I love that it's mostly like bamboo packaging. It's all recycled material. It's really, really clean. And I've also tried the Rosia as well. So if you like powder, then Rosia is a better option, I would say, to go with. But if you're looking more for like a liquid or a pressed powder, then Elate is a great option too. So they're both really clean brands.
I love, love, love Rosia. I love the coverage. I was shocked. It was the first natural product I had ever tried, and I was just shocked. So I was expecting a little bit of makeup, not anything not full coverage. And I put it on. I was like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. I was so excited. Yeah, it was really, really good.
Awesome. I'm so happy to hear that. So let's talk a little bit more about your wellness passion as self-love and being a self-love advocate. Because I feel like a couple of years ago, maybe, and even some people might even say this on social media, like self-love is a little bit, taboo or very repetitive, or people are using self-love as an excuse to make, decisions that aren't optimizing your health. So would you say that there is some type of niche around any of those statements, or even in the atmosphere of self-love that you can touch on?
There's extremists in every different niche, right? You can look at the fitness community, and then there's going to be some that are a lot more passionate, or a lot more, this is the only way to work out or to live that lifestyle. I think you're going to find that with everything, but there are some myths or misconceptions, I think, with what self-love needs to look like. And I think the root of everything is that you really just need to do what works for you, and especially what works for you in this season of life. And understand that it's really great to have, treat yourself days, or to go out and get your nails done, or to do little things like that. But I think it's also really important to find things that you can do out of love for yourself, that you can do on a daily basis, that don't cost any money, that can just, you don't need to rely on a nail salon being open, because what happens then if the world shuts down and you're not able to go to it? So finding things that you can do at home, and also understanding that in another direction, if you don't feel comfortable with posting pictures of yourself in your underwear online, that does not mean that you don't love yourself, or that you can't love yourself. Some people like to post pictures in a bathing suit, and that's awesome. And I think it's really important to have a lot of representation of different bodies. But if you're not there, that does not mean that you don't love yourself, or that you can't do that one day if that's what you want. But just to do what
Absolutely.
works for you.
I love that you said in this season of your life, because that's the other thing. What you did as your self-care routine a year ago could be so irrelevant to where you are right now. It's either that you've progressed along your journey, or your path and direction has changed, your priorities have changed, and something that worked for you a week ago as your self-love routine could totally be irrelevant to today. So with your self-love routine, can you tell us a little bit about what that looks like on a daily basis? Like, what are some of your routinely things that you do that help to, show yourself some self-love?
Yeah, for sure. So for me personally, I like working out first thing in the morning. I find that it is when I have the most energy. And I also find that the days that I don't work out, my mental health is substantially worse. That is just kind of like what works for me. I personally don't like eating breakfast before I work out, because I found that for me, it makes me feel really sick and sluggish. And if I were to eat breakfast, then I have to wait a few hours before I can actually work out, and that doesn't really work with my day. But that's to say that someone else's workout schedule may not look like that, and you may need to eat breakfast before you work out, or you may find that you work out later in the day. So for me, it was kind of like navigating that, and that if I don't get my workout in first thing in the morning, then my day is completely off.
Okay.
The other thing that is really important to me is kind of like almost a nighttime routine, where I always do a little bit of yoga. I try and keep it super light and just a gentle yoga flow. Just if I do too much, I know I will stay up all night and the endorphins will be going. So just something that's a little more gentle. And I will always read Harry Potter, or at least I am right now, because I'm on the 5th book, the best series out there. But I also am well aware that what works for me isn't going to work for someone else. So while I'm doing yoga and reading, for example, my boyfriend, he plays Call of Duty. And that is his me time. That is what he enjoys doing for himself. It makes him feel good and happy. But it's not something that I would enjoy. So yeah, those are my main things I like to do.
Awesome. Okay, so I love, a morning and evening routine, really important. And I think it's really important to emphasize that me and alone time, because that's actually where most of the work takes place for people, is when there's silence, or when there's less distractions, less social media, less ideas of what something should look like. But through the day, like you mentioned, way back when you were younger, there was obviously some disordered eating that you may have not even known was that, because you were so young. But what does that look like now in your self-love routine? Like, do you see restrictions on food as a way of managing your self-love through the day, or is it something that you kind of live freely through as well?
So this one's almost kind of hard because when someone looks at my diet, they may think it is very restrictive because I am vegan and gluten free. Because I've also have an egg allergy that I found out about a year, just over a year ago, maybe. Um, so to some people, it does look a lot more restrictive, but to me, it is an act of self love because I'm finally able to eat foods that don't make me sick, and I've kind of found a few different meals that I know I'm getting the nutrients I need. I know I'm getting protein and iron and everything that I need to get. So kind of sticking to a handful of things, at least for my breakfast and my lunch every day, that I know I'm going to feel healthy and happy and not have to worry about getting sick from anything. And that's, to me, really, really important and has been one of the biggest acts of self-love for me, is just kind of navigating that whole thing. But that is to say that for someone else, that may not be self-love for them.
Absolutely. I think it all depends on your relationship with the food. Like, is it
Absolutely
restrictive as in it's more of a mental restriction, or is it restrictive because you know that the consequences of letting loose of these restrictions causes the body and the mind and everything else in your life so much more pain, right?
Absolutely. And I like that you say mind as well, because they do say that your gut is your second brain. And when I know when I eat something, even if I don't have a full blown reaction to something, I'm foggier, I'm not feeling as well. So finding foods for me that keep me alert, I guess, even, and happy and healthy and not super bloated have been completely life changing for me.
That's amazing. That's really great. So, what would you say are some of your biggest wellness inspirations in the self love industry?
As in people?
Yeah, people or accounts maybe on social media, or brands maybe.
Um, so mine, I guess, unfortunately, are kind of more personal to me, and I think it's important to find like what works for you. But for me, it's my biggest inspirations in general are my nana. She ended up passing away a couple of years ago, right after I was dealing with all my health issues. Life definitely threw a few curveballs at me that year. But my nana, and also my aunt Debbie, who lost her sight when she was about my age. She's totally blind, but she is extremely into health and fitness, and she doesn't really let anything hold her back from what she wants to do. So when my nana was about 65, she ran the New York City Marathon with my Aunt Debbie together, which to me is a total inspiration and just a reminder that you can't let anything hold you back and to just live life to the fullest.
Absolutely. That's amazing. And like in pretty much every episode that I've interviewed with someone so far, and they mention their wellness inspiration, there's been a couple of people that have mentioned like their mom or their dad, but most of it is like a social media platform that they're referring to. So I love that you're able to share that, and that's an inspiration that you carry with you to kind of keep you going and keep you progressing along your wellness journey, and know that you are absolutely capable of anything that you want, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's amazing. Would you say that there's anything that's been a barrier or a kind of a setback for you along your wellness journey?
Definitely a couple of years ago, when I was going through all of my gut health slash self-love journey that was kind of worked into that, before I really dove into it and was working through how to turn it into something positive, I was in a really, really, really dark state. I was so worried and stressed, and I thought I was a failure because I wasn't working 24/7 and I wasn't able to, and just constantly being sick every time I ate and thinking that there was something wrong with me, and just how am I supposed to navigate this world that I was just starting to enter in with self-love, and how can I exist in this area or this niche on the internet when I'm really struggling with that myself. And there was a long period of time where I just couldn't really post on social media a whole much, and I had to really work internally and figure out what I was feeling and why I was feeling that way. And why did I see that as such a bad season of life? Because to be honest with you, I could really go for a nap in my days nowadays, and just accepting like where you are in life and being okay with that. But sometimes realizing that while you're in it is really, really, really hard.
Yeah, I agree. I think that as people who are advocating for health and wellness and self love and anything to do with your well being, sometimes you can feel almost like a fraud if you're not doing the things that you're telling people to do. And I found this personally as a nutritionist. It's like I suggest to people to avoid certain things, and then I may, have the chocolate or have the wine. And sometimes just the perception of what you think you have to do can be so overwhelming and negative that just doesn't feed into what you're trying to give off. So taking a rest, resetting, seeing where your well-being is at, I think is really important before you try to make the next step on a social media platform or whomever is your influences, whether it's in a group one-on-one or whatever that might be, to just kind of adjust to that, right?
Yes, absolutely. And just learning to cut yourself a little slack and realize that nobody's perfect. And that's also something important to remember when you are looking at anyone's Instagram profile. They could seem like the most confident or happy person in the world, but everybody has those days, to quote Hannah Montana. Um, we're all dealing with life and things, and you can't really judge yourself based on a snippet, but you also can't judge yourself based on your past self or based on what you think you should be doing.
Absolutely, for sure. So you have the opportunity to, share some insight with somebody, maybe in an elevator or, in a room or whatever that might be. But what are 3 things that you can provide to that person that can help them amplify their self-love routine or what that looks like in their lifestyle starting today?
I think the first thing that I would say would be to really look inwards and to really navigate where you are in life right now and what you need and what's really going on. Because I feel like we live in a society where it's really maybe encouraged to push down your emotion and to not really work through it and to say, oh, just be happy, or oh, it could be worse. But what you're experiencing, good, bad, or anything in between, is what you're going through right now. And those feelings are valid. And just to kind of like take a second to step back and think, what am I going through right now? And then, two, once you figured it out, or started to navigate what it is, look for experts who can help you in whatever you need. So that could look like speaking with a therapist, that could look like talking to a nutritionist, or talking to your doctor, or maybe going to the gym if you want to move your body a little bit more, or it could look like unfollowing people from social media, but kind of start taking the steps that you need and seeking help when you need it. And number 3, I would say, is that you just need to understand that life is short, and to remember that we all have good days and we all have some not so great days. And to just not compare where you are to what you see online, or even to where you were in a different season of life, because things are constantly changing and growing, and what you needed at one point in your life is not necessarily what you need today, and that's okay. You just have to love yourself first.
Absolutely. I love that. And, I think it's so easy to forget about the importance of loving yourself first, because if you're somebody who is, a mom, or you have other people that is in your circle that you're taking care of, or you have somebody who is close to you that maybe not be as healthy as they need to be and they're relying on you for something, sometimes you're always putting yourself on the back burner. But it's always easier said than done. But if you are not functioning optimally, or if you are not in tune with your well-being, then you're really not able to provide that to your support system as well back, right?
Absolutely. And it's definitely this idea that self-love can be selfish, or that it means that you don't care about someone else, or that you're not prioritizing someone else, but that's not necessarily the case at all. Self-love can look like a number of different things. It can look different depending on the day. It's just a matter of making a little bit of time for yourself, whether that is in the morning when you have a coffee, or going to a doctor's appointment to talk about something that just doesn't feel right, or talking with a therapist who can help you work through feelings that you're not really sure with what's going on. It's just about finding what works for you and what you need now, and not necessarily what you needed at another time.
Absolutely. And I also love that you mentioned seeking help, because I think that we're just programmed to think we've got it all figured out, or that Mr. Google is going to help us figure it out. But sometimes you just need a second opinion. And if you do have OCD tendencies or perfectionism or any of that psychological or mental imbalance that could be happening, it's very hard to navigate through those things by yourself. And you really just need somebody to have as a support system.
Absolutely. And I think that that can be sometimes really underrated, is just, it's good to look into things for yourself, and it's good to have an idea of kind of what's going on, or maybe the questions that you should ask, or understanding, oh, maybe that's not right, or that's not how something's supposed to feel, or something maybe a little off. But then finding someone who has experience, who can help you get you there a lot quicker than if you were to spend your time Googling and trying to navigate it yourself. It's a good starting point, but maybe not the finishing line.
Absolutely. That's so good. I love that all. So to wrap this up, Tasha, can you tell everybody where they can find you on social media platforms and your website?
Yeah, for sure. So the website is just theedited.ca, or on social media at the Edited Shop. So we're on Instagram, a little bit on Facebook, and a lot on Pinterest.
Awesome. So I will link those for you guys so you can click through and give her a follow. But thank you guys so much for tuning in for the episode today. And thank you so much for Tasha for taking time out of your busy schedule to show our community what self-love and self-care acts look like.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please be sure to like, subscribe, comment, and share on social media that you're listening to the Wellness on Purpose podcast.